Aloha, my name is Raghu-nomics. I'm a writer. I've done 26, 27 books on social economic policy proposals. This one being the latest. I don't know if this is one book or three. I've been writing about the Ukraine-Russian war for the last almost 3 years, and it's culminated into an actual peace proposal. The big turning point of it becoming a proposal was coming across something referred to as the Budapest Memorandum, wherein Russia had asked America to guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty in their bid to get the 1,700 missiles that Ukraine had in their possession. So after the fall of the old Soviet Union, a new Russia had come into play, and the new president, his name was Yeltsin, wanted to turn over a new leaf, and this was during Clinton's years, this celebration that we could have a world free of nuclear weapons. So for those that are not of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, these were very heady times. It looked like we had actually done so. And so because Russia was now broke, they had nothing to offer, they guaranteed Ukraine's sovereignty. So I came across this and said this actually answers a great deal of the controversy about America being nosy and being in Ukraine. So I outlined the a 10-point summary of what that is, that broadcaster, and I had reached out to an acquaintance to do the narration. He's a handsome fellow with a deep, commanding voice, so generally the writers are not the ones doing the presentations. We're a little too nerdy for the camera. But he said no. And so this is in response to him, and what I ended up with was outlining the entire peace proposal, which in a nutshell was Ukraine for North Korea. Everything that Putin is asking in his demands for Ukraine, we're saying, well, America needs those same requirements for North Korea for exactly the same reasons. This is a 9-point, or as I call it, the 9 cards of peace. And this just came flowing out in a summary of the two or three books that I've written on this over the last 3 years since the beginning of the Ukraine war. So it's a great summary of the issue. You will find that any one point, even a single sentence, can represent one, several, even dozens of videos. So it's a great compression of all the issues of the last 3 years. So with that, his name is Mark. Aloha, Mark. Robin said you will not touch this project and so refuse to be a broadcaster to our petition to Tucker Carlson. We only request he kindly cover the Budapest Memorandum. So this agreement between Russia and the U.S. for Russia requesting the U.S. to guarantee Ukraine's sovereignty against Russian aggression so they could get these 1,700 nukes was called the Budapest Memorandum, and I've titled it The Memo of Peace from Buda. Robin said you are a Trumpster. You won't do anything that goes after Tucker Carlson, lends Biden legitimacy, or undermine Putin's war in Ukraine. I reach out to you personally because I am confident you will like this once you see how much Trump will love this peace initiative. Trump gave us the art of the deal, but the more cards we give Trump, greater the deal he will get from Putin. Our peace initiative gives Trump a very strong hand. Trump will now have 9 excellent playing cards for this poker game of war and peace with Russia. Trump will love it. You will see why. Trump, of course, is the trump card. We now hand him the ace card along with 4 queens and 3 kings. Here's the 9 cards of peace. The first 3 are the 3 terms of peace. Number 1, as for Ukraine, so too for North Korea. So it's just a swap. Everything he's demanded of Ukraine, Putin's demanding of Ukraine, we're demanding of North. And it really sort of adds a real dimension, and because right now it's just one-sided, and so it really helps mirror what Putin is demanding of the West. Number 2, no more Putin nuke-mongering. So Putin has been doing a lot of nuclear threats, and he uses it as the primary lead for a growing number of foreign policy issues. And we're saying You don't get to use this ever again after Ukraine. And number 3, the Cuban Missile Crisis, a template for peace, a nuclear-free zone for the North Pole. So in the Cuban Missile Crisis, Khrushchev, U.S. President Kennedy told the premier of Russia, Khrushchev, he has to get his missiles out of Cuba. And so Khrushchev said, okay, I'll take my missiles out of Cuba, but America has to take theirs out of Turkey and Europe. And so we're saying there's precedents. We've been negotiating with the Russians for decades now. And so we're saying a comparable would be if we're out of Ukraine, then Putin has to take his nukes out of the North Pole, a nuclear-free zone in the North Pole. The 3 instruments of peace, number 1, the Budapest Memorandum. That's the agreement that I told you about, the memo of peace from Buda. Budapest Memorandum, America's moral mandate and legal obligation. I never had any idea of this. I just discovered it a couple months ago, and I was like, how has this not been in the conversation? And we really wanted Tucker Carlson to cover it, and I'm really surprised that he hasn't. It's almost like he's been dodging it. I don't know why. So this is official, formal petition, sending it out, that he please do so. Number 2, the carrot and stick for Putin. North Korea port versus Russians slaughtered in Ukraine. So in foreign policy, they call it a stick and carrot. You have to have incentives, and here's the penalty. The incentive for Putin is that what we would do with North Korea is hand over the northern eastern side so he can put in a warm seaport there, because Russia has no warm seaport in the winter months for the entire continent, so it's a big deal. And then number 3, the big stick. Zelensky just won America's conventional war with Russia. So this is the big surprise. I didn't realize Ukraine just won the war. There's a lot of moving parts to explain that, and we save that for last, and we'll get to that. The 3 custodians of peace. Number 1, Trump, the art of the deal. The Trump card, good cop. So this guy's a Trumpster, and so I want him to see that all we're doing is equipping. He can only see America exclusively through the lens of Trump as president. But the real fact is that we as a country need to come together to figure out what we want in this peace negotiation. So I'm using Trump as a stand-in while talking to a Republican. Number 2, Tucker Carlson, messenger of peace, queen of spades. So Tucker Carlson is a recognized sympathetic ear to Putin. And so what better person to present this memorandum of this memo of peace? And number 3, Joe Biden, pit bull, bad cop, king of spades. So now Biden can continue putting the pressure on Putin now that we have a clearly defined objective of peace in mind. So now everybody's working together. We have Trump working together with Putin, and America, working together with Biden. So America can now all be on the same page. Take note that America has already traveled this road to nuclear confrontation and settlement with Russia. We did this 4 times before. History calls us to do so once more. This precedence for America offers a treasure trove of experience to call upon. From Kennedy to Reagan and Bush Sr., they culminated with Clinton as the final step to this multi-decade process. Their gradual success combined into a step-by-step formula. This victory talks to us today with a timely wisdom for a shortcut not allowed these previous presidents. This is what we offer to build upon here in this peace initiative. So it's really interesting. All those elements started coming together. So after writing for almost 3 years and then writing this out, so here's the most famous was President Kennedy's Cuban Missile Crisis, and that's where we exchange no missiles in North Pole. The second was President Reagan's series of steps of peace through strength, which is the upper hand that we now have in Ukraine. The third was Bush Sr. with his series of bureaucratic horse trading, which is what I'm suggesting Trump can do. And then the fourth was President Clinton's Budapest Memorandum, which gives us the legal obligation and moral mandate. Today, we apply each of these in this latest round of nuclear peace talks with Russia. We can now complete this entire process as a single-step package. We've already been through this before. We've already been with every scenario, everything that we're hearing, pros and cons in this war. I lived through 3 generations of these negotiations with Russia. And it's interesting to see. We've done this before. We can call upon that. The larger issue is providing America a framework to begin these talks of peace. As of today, we have no starting point for America to work from. So one of the biggest problems that we have is, like, what do we want out of the peace process? We haven't actually, it's just attack on Putin's side, and Trump saying, oh, well, I'll negotiate with them. What does that look like? So we've begun that, provided a framework. We offer that here for the first time. The story begins right there where it ended last time. That is when we negotiated the end of Russian nukes right there in Ukraine with the Budapest Memorandum. This is the card you were offered to broadcast. It is the centerpiece for any conversation with Russia. This is critical because as of today, Putin holds all the cards to the negotiations. All of his terms are exclusive to his advantage and to America's detriment. We change that here with this peace initiative for Ukraine. We can now offer a balance to these negotiations, missing from any discussion of peace with Putin so far until today. Welcome to the memo from Buddha, the God of Peace. So that was my personal letter to him, and now we're breaking down each of those 9 cards. So the first is the 3 terms of peace. The first of those, the Ace card. Actually, that was the second. The first is Trump. As for Ukraine, so too for North Korea. The Ace card is that America gets of North Korea as Putin demands of Ukraine. Russia is taking 1/3 of Ukraine's landmass, so America will also get 1/3 of North Korea's landmass. Putin wants Ukraine free of all nukes, free of any national military, and free of political affiliations, a neutral zone of nations, and of course, Zelensky must go. I mean, to Putin supporters, this all sounds very reasonable, but when you ask the same of Putin for North Korea, then you get to feel the actual burden of what is being asked. In return, America will now get the exact same from North Korea, a nuclear-free and demilitarized North Korea. It too will be a neutral nation of non-alignment, and so no affiliations with both Russia and China. And yes, Kim also has to go. No more Kim. So it's really just a mirror copy of what Putin's asking, and that's the reason why it's such a, it provides an equilibrium there that we have in none of the peace actually we have no peace conversations, so this will change that. Putin insists that Ukraine represents an existential threat to Russia. Well, obviously, North Korea is a clear and present existential threat to America. Kim says he can destroy America. Kim has already fired 2 nuclear missiles towards Hawaii. It's really surprising how few people know this, but here in Hawaii, it's really firsthand for us. Kim has been very clear North Korea can now reach Hawaii, all thanks to Russia. So Russia's been, it's not been plotting with North Korea against this. He's been actively helping the destruction of America. And again, this is where Ukraine comes in. All the complaints Putin has about Ukraine, it's so true with North Korea. This is not some hobby of peace for you, Mark, Robin, and me. We now sit front and center in the line of fire, the first to die. As Tulsi Gabbard said, Kim's nuclear threats are very real for us here in Hawaii. They really are. The rest of the country just doesn't get it. It's very upsetting. This gives us the opportunity to speak out and try and do something right here from Hawaii. Please know. And so when I started saying, let's have some negotiation, I was really just startled at the level of pushback I was getting from Putin supporters and Trumpsters. And then this is a summary of why they are so supportive of Putin. I am familiar with the great hope that Trumpsters hold for Putin. The offer here is for us to take advantage of all that Putin supporters so glowingly talk about. They boast of Putin's special gifts for purging corruption and taking on evil. We ask that Putin now use these same gifts to save us from the great evils of North Korea. So I just was a little exasperated because they were saying Putin's this great guy and all these wonderful things he's going to do for Ukraine and what he's pushing back. Meanwhile, he's, buddies and supporter. He's an active, what do they call it when you empower somebody? For Kim. So I was like, well, listen, he should do that for Kim, what Putin supporters say he's going to do of Ukraine. Trumpsters see Putin as the archangel of victory over the globalist elite and their plot to subjugate and destroy the world as we know it. And that's always where they start. They feel that Putin's Russia is the last holdout of nations against them. He leads the fight against all the evil they see of the globalists. This makes them very protective of both Putin and his war efforts as the last of the Mohicans. So there's such a strong sense of we got to protect Putin because he's the only one standing up to the globalists and the nations. I was like, okay, I don't want to mess with your savior there. Trumpsters are confident that Putin will destroy the globalist agenda. That starts with Putin's victory over Ukraine, and with it, the defeat of Biden. Gone too are the Democrats and all the liberal governments of Europe. The final bonus, Trump's re-election win. Yes, Trumpsters have a lot riding on Putin's victory over Ukraine. Yes, so it was really interesting to discover that this wasn't sort of like a neutral or passive thing or sort of, on the sidelines. They need Putin to win in Ukraine, and here's the reasons why. Yes, Trumpsters see Putin as the leader of the white coats. Putin will purge Ukraine of the cabal of child sex trafficking, biochemical labs, nuclear weapons, stop to America's warmongering, and take out their mafia-led corruption, money laundering, vax labs, and drug running. How so very impressive indeed. And the list only goes on from there to all the wonderful things Putin will do for Ukraine. In short, they see Putin's invasion of Ukraine as the most sacred of holy wars against the greatest evil in all the world. I'm not exaggerating here. And it's like, it's universal. Like, you can talk to people on the East Coast, you could talk to Trumpsters or Putin supporters, and these are all the elements that are in play, and there's like this impassioned sense that we need to support Putin's victory in Ukraine. So I'm saying if he's really that good, he should have no problem taking care of North Korea. It all sounds so very promising, how chivalrous of Putin, but to our point in this peace initiative. If Putin can do all of these extraordinary feats for Ukraine, well then surely he can do these same feats right there in his own backyard with North Korea. That's all we're asking for. So if he's as great of a guy as you say he is, then let's have a demo right there in North Korea. So to our request, all those demands Putin has of Ukraine and that talk of all the wonderful things he will do for Ukraine, we want Putin to deliver that same deal for us there in North Korea from Kim. Kim offers Zelensky a big advantage. Yeah, so Zelensky is so demonized, but, and it's like, well, America's corrupt and Zelensky's corrupt. Well, if you're going to judge America by Zelensky and Zelensky is corrupt, let's do a comparison to Putin's company. Kim is just a horrific monster by most everyone's account. Whatever people feel about Zelensky, most agree Kim is far worse in every category by a long shot. So it's a great comparable. Again, it's just such a great, a one for one. You may now find why Trump would love this ace card of peace. Out with the old and with the new. Goodbye, Kim, at long last. And so I tip my hat to the great confidence that Trumpsters have in Putin. Their faith suggests that if there is anyone that can remove Kim from North Korea, it's Putin. As goes Zelensky, so goes Kim, a 2-for-1 for Putin. And so to that one universal most would agree, the end of Kim is certainly a great deal for the world. Excuse me, a great day for the world. This is the ace card of peace. The reason, it is but the mirror and exact reflection of all that Putin is demanding of America in Ukraine. We do recognize that Putin will find plenty that is unreasonable, unfeasible, or unsafe in our request of him for North Korea. That is the point. Each of those things have a clear and direct counterpart in Putin's demands of Ukraine. It's a 1-for-1. And so now it's putting Putin in our shoes. It's the carbon copy of Putin's terms of peace with America, and so it's here we find equilibrium of a truly fair and equitable trade with Russia. And that's really what it's about. So it's a great opening premise to begin with. You may now see why Trump will love this peace initiative. You should find this ace card of peace so very much the Trump brand, and so finally activate this Trump card of peace, Trump himself. So again, I'm talking to a Trumpster, and so he can only see America in terms of Trump, and so we're using Trump as the stand-in for this peace process, and he's a dramatic version of it, so it works great. Number 2, the Queen of Hearts, no more Putin nuke-mongering. Nuke-mongering means threatening nuclear retaliation for conventional battlefield losses during invasions of third-party nations or as a matter of managing other routine foreign relations. So Putin goes into these countries and he says, if anyone dares retaliate, we are going to nuke you. And he's been using the same model now, and we'll give the list of the countries there, how he's been doing it. We're saying No more. You can't lead with your nukes anymore. Nuke-mongering goes to the heart of Putin's reign, and so too must define any negotiation with Russia. The world talks of America's warmongering. So everyone's, America's just a warmonger. Well, Putin's a nuke-monger. It's far more serious. This is where the U.S. goes into other countries using the military to conquer. The world knows that only too well. What better example than the U.S. invasion of Iraq? However, Iran unleashed a brutal counterattack against U.S. forces in Iraq to great effect. America faced horrific losses from Iran's counterinsurgency. However, the U.S. did not turn around and threaten Iran with nuclear obliteration of the entire world if Iran did not stop attacking Americans. This is the difference between America's warmongering and Putin's nuke-mongering. If Putin was there in Iraq, he would turn to Iran and say, if you send any more forces, we're going to nuke you. So this is the difference between America warmongering and Putin's nuke-mongering. Instead, America accepted the massive losses and left Iraq. This is the reason why we didn't go in with our nukes. In contrast, Putin goes into countries such as Azerbaijan, Georgia, Chechnya, and Ukraine and opens with the clear threat of nuclear retaliations should anyone dare counter these Russian invasions. Don't get to do it anymore. That ends with this negotiation over Ukraine. This is nuke-mongering, and so we ask that this ends today with Ukraine. Ukraine will be our next nuclear peace treaty. Ukraine is the last time Putin gets to use this card of nukes to scare off counterforces of military occupation. Ukraine is the last stop for leading with nukes in his invasion of other countries, the last time for Putin's nuke-mongering. Few Americans are even aware of Putin's continuous nuke-mongering, but Trump did take note. The video of Trump's response to Putin's nuke-mongering had little circulation, but shows Trump would be happy to negotiate this end to Putin's nuke-mongering. Number 3, Queen of Diamonds, Cuban Missile Crisis, a template for peace, a nuclear-free zone for the North Pole. I wrote about 4 chapters on this. This is just a half-a-page summary of it, but again, we have a lot to draw on as Americans in negotiating peace and nuclear negotiations with Russia. Here we point to President Kennedy's threat of nuclear retaliation if Russia did not remove their nukes from Cuba. Putin supporters point to this as Putin's comparable demands for Ukraine. The Soviets withdrew their nukes from Cuba, but they did so on one condition. Premier Khrushchev demanded that the U.S. remove all nukes from Turkey and Europe. Russia made America pay a big price for leaving Cuba. No nukes in Cuba means no nukes in Turkey. This is also shorthand to infer all of Europe as well. That was a hefty price President Kennedy paid for America's free of Cuban nukes. A fair comparison would have Putin take all nukes out of the North Pole and any such threats to the entire hemisphere of the Americas. That's a fair duplicate to Kennedy's end of the U.S. nukes in Turkey, and once again also a fair counterpart to Putin's demands to remove all U.S. presence from Ukraine. Number 4, Queen of Spades, Tucker Carlson, Messenger of Peace. What better person to do it? So we have the petition out there. We'd like to get 1 million people to sign that petition. Tucker Carlson, please cover the Budapest Memorandum. If we can get even 10, what to speak of 100,000 people, I'm sure he'll do so, and we'll recognize the rebalancing of the narrative over this Ukraine-Russian war. Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin lends him the international stature as foremost of America's sympathetic ear to Putin's cause. He stands the clear critic to Biden's policies. He's Putin's own preference for messaging the world about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This places Tucker the perfect envoy to deliver this message about the Budapest Memorandum. Calling out Tucker Carlson in our petition is more than some petty gotcha media stunt. He really is the best first choice to America's side of the story. Let him deliver the details to America's moral, political, and international law that so bound the U.S. to defend Ukraine's sovereignty for 30 years. America made this promise in the hour of mankind's greatest hopes for a global peace and a world truly free of nuclear weapons. That was the spirit of the Budapest Memorandum, and its spirit calls to us these 3 decades later. Can you think of a better envoy to this message of peace? A peace requested by that of old Russia, of new beginnings, and their call to America to enforce it. Who better than Tucker Carlson to call upon this memo of peace from Buddha? Number 5, Queen of Clubs, Budapest Memorandum, America's Moral Mandate and Legal Obligation. So I have 2 videos on this. This is just a 1-paragraph summary of it. You need me to pause?
Yeah.
Well, we are cranking here. How is it?
It's going great so far. And yeah, quick little pause there. Stay seated. Do you need water or anything?
I'll just take a little sip just to keep from getting lightheaded.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so...
Recording in progress.
Ready? Number 5, the Queen of Clubs. Budapest Memorandum, America's Moral Mandate and Legal Obligation. So I did 2 videos on this. I've summarized it in just to 1 paragraph here. For more information, look at those other videos. We refer to the Budapest Memorandum as the Memo of Peace from Buddha. This memo presents America with the moral mandate and legal obligation to defend Ukraine's sovereignty. It's a signed legal commitment to stand as guardian against any and all forms of Russian aggression. That included social, political, and economic interference as well. This memo of peace from Buddha was in fact the handiwork of the first president of the new Russia, Nikita Yeltsin. He is the one who personally asked President Clinton to make this guarantee to Ukraine. Yeltsin wanted Ukraine's 1,700 nuclear warheads. America delivered every one of those nukes to Yeltsin. This was a major coup for Russia. This memo of peace hands America this club of legal, moral, and international mandate. This is what you were to read in our broadcast. Remember, this was originally a letter to Mark. These are the hidden facts the world should know in any serious peace talks with Russia. This memo of peace from Buddha is the centerpiece and beginning point in negotiating with President Yeltsin. Chapter 6, King of Hearts, Carrot and Stick of Russia, North Korea port versus Russian slaughter in Ukraine. Diplomacy is often best served with the menu of 2 choices. There's the hefty cost of noncompliance versus the great rewards of cooperation. This brand of foreign relations is known as a stick and carrot policy. America has used it quite effectively over the centuries. We offer to do so once more here today. It will come as quite the surprise to most that Ukraine has found stunning battlefield success. That gives a great deal to build upon. It took me a couple years to uncover this major discovery. This is detailed in the next chapter, but for now, know this about Zelensky. Zelensky has just handed America the strongest negotiating advantage since the fall of the old Soviet Union. Russian forces now lay spread thin, sitting ducks in open plains of Ukraine's very large and flat fields. There remains some groupings of trees and small hills on this pancake they call Ukraine. Russia has leveled the towns and villages in their march over Ukraine. This now leaves them overexposed to any American counterattack. The more land taken, thinner their ranks. They sit ever further from other Russia's borders. They are overextended, the strain showing more vividly by the month, and so too, so very exhausted. This sets them as easy pickings to any conventional war with America. We can talk more of the big stick foreign policy in the next chapter. For now, let's highlight the carrot. It offers Putin a great deal incentive. There is the immediate dissolution of North Korea. From this old repression will rise a warm seaport for Russia. This should prove one great big carrot of appeal to Putin. Russia direly needs such a port, a new port to warm waters. Putin presently has no reliable warm seaport on the east coast of the continental Russian seaboard. This severely impacts Russia during those long Siberian winter months. North Korea changes that. It offers the access Russia needs. Putin would now have the long sought after warm seaport for the first time. It's a game changer for Russia, as much militarily and commercially as politically. It's a really big deal. So it has this massive, gigantic, it covers, 1/3 of the world, and the entire East Coast is blocked off during wintertime. So getting that port in North Korea would change everything for Putin. America's embargo would also be lifted. Putin supporters are convinced Russia is doing just fine. They say the Western blockade has no effect. However, there's growing signs that offer a different story. It's one of building economic pains. They are proving far more punishing than most realize. Those can be detailed later, but for now, know that lifting the embargo will be a welcomed relief. It's certainly another carrot to add to Putin's basket of incentives. Russia gets the east side of North Korea. China walks off with the northwest side. In other words, everyone subdivide North Korea. South Korea takes the south end of the country from coast to coast. That is to say, we have all of Kim's neighbors looking to replace North Korea. Kim is a fair and equal opportunity pain in the backside to every nation, as much for China and Russia as for the West. Now imagine we get this Putin and Xi alliance to join the West in approaching Kim. This may be enough to convince Kim. Walking off to a beautiful retirement can sound so much more appealing than fighting off Russia, China, Japan, and the US. Winning the hearts of the world is why this card is called the King of Hearts. This can all sound so unlikely. Well, yes, of course. But don't forget, it was so unlikely that Russia would take Ukraine. Still not completed even after the third year of fighting. Again, Putin supporters like to point out, this is Putin. If anyone can do this, it is Putin. So let it be for North Korea too. Such are the prospects that are now set into motion, new possibilities rising before us, all thanks to Zelensky and his valiant fight for freedom. And so now to the big stick handed to us by Zelensky, the next chapter. Number 7, Chapter 7, King of Clubs, the big stick. Zelensky just won America's conventional war with Russia. It's a really, really big deal. There's all the Western media raving about Ukraine's grand battlefield victories in their fight for freedom, and there's one big problem. No one believes anything America says anymore. Most see it as misinformation, just deduce the opposite of whatever the media says, and that would be the real story, or so goes the public perception. I used to feel the same. I did. I mean, I was just, I was actually almost a Trumpster. And then Prigozhin happened. Prigozhin ranted about the hardships for soldiers, lack of weapons, terrible coordination, low manpower, and even the lower morale on Russia's front lines. Prigozhin's diatribes went on for days. It was really funny. I mean, this guy is like, he is the personification of the Putin man, and he just went off, and he went off, and, post after post. Here's what's so interesting about his video post. He restated most every talking point the U.S. media had been saying for the last prior 2 years. So that was really surprising to me. After dismissing all the Western accounts, Prigozhin comes along and restates the whole thing over about a 3 or 4 day period on his video post. Important to understand who Prigozhin is. Prigozhin was Putin's personal cook, so close a friend was he. Prigozhin was also the dark lord of Putin's underworld, from black mark and crime rings to the most notorious of Russia's black ops around the world. He was, when you talk about badass, he's probably the world's greatest badass until Putin knocked him off. The pimp daddy of hardened criminals, and yet so extreme the pounding by Ukraine that Prigozhin actually went mad, as in he went insane. So this was supposed to be like the fight was over, Ukraine's defeated, they can't get the men, etc., etc. And meanwhile, Prigozhin is just getting, it broke him. He turned around, left Ukraine, and went marching. Prigozhin turned around, left Ukraine, and went marching into Russia with 25,000 troops and tanks. Now, this man has dedicated himself. He's Putin's right-hand man, his best friend, and he turns on. And so the talk of a wider mutiny throughout Russia. He went through all these towns and nobody stopped him, even though there was a number of military bases. So there was a mutiny, a brew. Putin went running for the foothills in St. Petersburg. This scared the shit out of him. A few weeks later, Prigozhin was assassinated, but the point of this went unnoticed. And this is really the key to this was the turning point for me. Was Putin suffering far greater losses in Ukraine than his supporters realized? This is not about a political posture, but nuclear obliteration. This is what scared me. If Putin's being cornered, we're in serious trouble. And the storyline is, oh, he's doing great and everything's fine. But the more Putin is being cornered, so too the closer to nuclear retaliation we get. And so began my writing My concern was that we may be far closer to a nuclear response than most realize. So this was the tipping point for me, Prigozhin. I only have a page and a half left to go. I began noticing the same messaging coming from Putin supporters as well, but in a different note. America is starting a nuclear war with Russia, they told us, sometimes daily. Their urgency grew in step with Putin's own growing threats of nuclear war. So it started looking like Putin was starting to sweat it. I recalled the war games Putin shared with China just a few years before. I remember reading about those. It didn't really get a lot of coverage in America, but it sort of scared me a little bit. Putin's swagger was only matched by his boast. Putin could beat the U.S. in an open conventional war, he bragged, and America believed him. They did. America was scared after that. Please take note, those days are long gone. In their place is the threat of nuclear war. Putin's latest posture, the U.S. and Europe must step down or face the great apocalypse. And so that question of all time, there's no bigger question than this one. This is it. Are these nuclear threats a dictator's admission to battlefield losses? Putin can no longer afford the losses there in Ukraine. So how would Putin respond if he's actually getting squeezed? He's going to threaten nuclear war. Welcome to Nuke-Mongering. This is such a different story over the one Putin supporters give us about the ease of Russia's wins in Ukraine. If Putin was doing so well in Ukraine, why all the nuclear threats? Something doesn't add up. The final piece of this puzzle was there in Ukraine's counteroffensive this last summer. Zelensky has been roundly ridiculed for only liberating, quote, 4% in new territory. It's the running joke for Putin supporters. Here's the thing that is actually funny about this 4%. Russia has 10 times the manpower, 10 times the weapon, 10 times the tank, 10 times the missiles, and most of all, 10 times the money. And yet they lost 4% of their territory of the most fortified battlefield since World War II. So they're entrenched. This is like World War II Germany, and they lost 4%. Here's the question everyone missed. If Russia has 10 times the military and lost 4% their lands, does that mean Ukraine is 14 times better than the Russians? I only have one page left.
You're good, you're good.
We see the same odds today in Russia's latest gains on the battlefield. Putin has to lead with 15 to 20 times the military advantage to win any ground. Are the Ukrainians the new 300 Spartans that took out hundreds of thousands of Persians centuries ago? The big difference, the Greeks did it for a few days, Ukrainians have been doing it for a few years. How has this gone unnoticed for so long? Here's why this is so important. Giving Ukraine a comparable military would obliterate Putin's army in a matter of days, if this was true. I mean, we can double check and see, but if it is, this is, anyway, it means it's all in our. And so we arrive at the great gift that Zelensky just handed America. Zelensky just won America's conventional war with Russia. We didn't know 5 years ago when China and Russia had their war games. Today we do. Zelensky has removed all doubt from Putin's mind that America could destroy Russia's forces in Ukraine. It's now time for America to realize this as well. And so to our final card in this peace negotiation with Putin. America now holds the high ground and full advantage in any open battle with Russia. And so the final card to this deck of peace. The conventional war with Russia is over. Zelensky just did this on just 3% of America's military budget. Or if Putin likes, we can see what a Ukrainian army of parity to Russia's can do. We now have the 9 cards of peace for Putin. Putin can accept our terms for peace, Ukraine for North Korea, no more nuke-mongering, and a North Pole as the world's nuclear-free zone. Take it or we will unleash the full fury of a fully equipped and backed Ukrainian fighting force like Putin has never seen before. The feasibility for any of this must be reconsidered, and I'm not saying this is a done deal, but it gives us a lot to work with to open this peace process. But once again, it gives us a starting point to fair-handed negotiations with Putin, now done in equilibrium to America's legitimate and binding role as guardian to Ukraine, and so ordained and requested by Yeltsin those 3 decades ago. Happy 30th anniversary to this memo of peace from Buddha. It's 3 years of fighting.
Wow.
Thank you.
Do you have a little outro to say, okay, that's it? Thanks, guys, for listening.
These points have gone unanswered because the Democrats have been overtaken by a communist ideal that never do you ever talk to the point, you simply cancel. And so in a topic that they have actually have the winning counter argument for, I mean, these Ukrainians are just so extraordinary, they never actually answered the issue until today. So I'm thankful for them for that, because it's left this amazing treasure trove of reconsiderations. And of course, the Republicans aren't going to do it. And so it really personifies how much has been overlooked and buried in the what we call political discourse or arguments. There's this vast treasure trove of things that will dramatically expand the scope and opportunity and America's empowerment if we're willing to take the time to do that. And that's what I'm trying to do with Raghu-nomics.